What should I know about Veritasium?
It was under the blood moon. I felt my heart come. I held you in this strange light, a place where shadows run. And as I kissed your glowing skin.
So basically, I'm looking to tie the entire world to Veritasium.
So we're sort of floating on fumes as it is. And then that bubble started popping again. Real estate values in the big cities were going down. Okay. Um, the stock market was very, very highly valued, right? So it was ready to pop. And then COVID hit. Okay. COVID hit right after the everything bubble started to pop. I call it the everything bubble because usually you have a bubble in the stock market. And if there's a bubble in the stock market drops, money flies into bonds. You know, usually money goes from where it's not treated well to where it's treated well. Recently, over the last 7 to 10 years, you had the everything bubble where everything increased in price simultaneously. Commodities, bonds, stocks, real estate. So instead of having money go from one asset class to another, you just had everything that had any risk attached to it flying up in price. You don't have to be an expert in investment. All you have to just take your money, throw it somewhere, and it's going to ride the bubble up. Does that sound sustainable? A quick answer is no. Okay, so that started popping. Real estate in the New York metro area started going bust, particularly the high-end condo market, which is almost all of Manhattan, much of Brooklyn, etc. You had equities that were teetering, and you have bonds that have gone through what is now a 50-year bubble. Bond rates have been slowly trickling down for the last 50 or 60 years. So right before that bubble was really about to get going, COVID hit. And then you had this big shutdown, not only in the US, but worldwide. That shutdown caused a lot of economic malaise, a lot of unemployment, of course, but that created cover for the everything bubble that was popping anyway. So a lot of the pundits and a lot of those who are biased and get paid not to see the truth or not to convey the truth said that COVID started all this. And don't worry, it'll be a V-shaped recovery once, you get a vaccine, COVID is over. That's nonsense because you have investment pundits now doubling and moonlighting as immunologists and virologists. Immunologists and virologists say this is a novel virus and we don't know anything about it. Okay, a vaccine, even with fast tracking, would be a year or two at bare minimum off. And once you get that, right, the solution is still not there because you have to administer it, you have to see if it works, et cetera, et cetera. So that unrealistic euphoria of a V-shaped recovery, plus the Fed, who actually sees the truth, of course, they never convey it, okay, completely. They decided to print more money in US dollars since October than has been printed in 40-something years. Okay, 40% of the monetary base has been added, right, to the world since October. Okay, that's absolutely unprecedented. It's never happened before in the US. Meanwhile, interest rates have become the lowest they've ever been, and risky asset prices have spiked higher than they've ever been. Okay, at the same time, the government starts to give away free money. It's never really done that before consistently, right? And unemployment has spiked higher than it's ever been in the history of this country, okay, since records have been keeping. So all these all-time high bad news events, okay, and all-time high remedial events are happening. And at the same time, the stock market is flying up, okay? The reason is not because stocks are doing better, because the prices are going up, which makes the stocks more expensive, but their earnings potential are going down because of slower economic activity. You've had, horrible GDP growth. The GDP has dropped more in the last quarter than it has in the history of this country. Again, okay, so all bad news, but the stock market's going up, which creates a super expensive stock market. So when the stock market goes up that way, earnings potential goes on that way, and the unemployment goes down, and the economic activity goes down, you have a guaranteed crash that's guaranteed to happen. If that crash doesn't happen, then the stock market limps along until economic activity reaches stock prices 10, 15 years into the future. Look at Japan, where they had a lost decade, but that lost decade has lasted about 30 years. So with all these moving parts going forward, These predictions are like the 2008 crash on steroids. And I say predictions because you said predictions, but I like to use the word observations. Right? These unbiased empirical observations show basically a depression coming. And this depression is not just in the US, but this is worldwide. The UK, which has a new spike, which has, again, a record drop in GDP that it never experienced before, including World War II and World War I. You have the EU, 16 nations, again, world record all-time high drop in GDP. You have the Asian nations, Japan, same thing, China, same thing, Korea, India. So the whole world is in a big mess. Add on top of that, that the US is in a particular position because it is the strongest economy. It has the reserve currency, which means it can abuse its currency and get away with it because everybody needs this currency to do global business. Okay, but it has the largest military and the most political influence, even though that's in question right now with the current administration, who I think has done a horrible job, but that's a different discussion. When you take a look at all this, the primary factor in getting past this, the first step is to get the virus under control, which the US is, of all developed nations, has done the worst. The reason is because the US is mired in politics and political struggle. So instead of taking a scientific method of eliminating the virus, they took a political method. And the virus and the issue of the virus and how to contain it and treat it has become a political football. Okay, the danger is the virus doesn't care at all what political party you belong to, whether you're left or right, conservative or liberal. An infection is an infection. That game has set the US back significantly. Okay, so where the US could have probably gained an extra 4 or 5 GDP points, instead it's playing political football and it's setting the nation back, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, which suffer the most because they don't have the capital last like big businesses do. And considering that big businesses have the capital last, a lot of them are dropping like flies because at the same time, you have this COVID economic shutdown, you would have a sea change in the way business is done. Now, most business actually, is now done over the internet virtually, which means a lot of brick and mortar stores and a lot of companies that put large investments in retail spaces can heal. As a matter of fact, even without COVID, their days were numbered. I predicted the collapse of many retail spaces back in 2010. Okay, 2009, 2010, 2011. Fast forward 10 years, you have Century 21, Sears, Kmart. You have a variety of multiple businesses that don't have a strong enough internet presence to compete with the giants such as Amazon, Walmart, Target. So you have a structural change in the way of doing business. You have a macroeconomic slump. You have fundamental issues that are negative. You have demographic changes. These changes, demographic changes, are strongest in the cities where the big metropolitan areas, with New York being prime, #1 worldwide, has the strongest concentration of Fortune, say, 5,000 companies. If you want a worldwide presence and want to attract the best talent, you would probably locate in Manhattan or somewhere in Silicon Valley. Now that they've had the big lockdown and everybody's doing things over the internet, and many companies are giving flexibility as to whether to come in for health reasons or for the fact that they realize that there's no reason to pay $500,000 a month for prime Manhattan real estate when you can have everybody work from home and it's just about as efficient, if not more efficient. So the world is changing at the same time that bubbles are busting, at the same time that a lot of people are getting sick, at the same time that a lot of people are losing jobs. So that's a very, I don't want to call it pessimistic view of the world, but again, a realistic view of the world. Now, during this, right, these massive times is when you have some of the greatest creations, the most significant creations of wealth in history. During the Great Depression, you had what used to be middle-class families eating dog food out of cans. You also had some of the greatest wealth created, dynastic family wealth created. Same thing during World War I. Same thing during the last big bust in 2008. right? A lot of people became very poor, but a small coterie of people became very, very wealthy. Okay, this is the time to learn how to concentrate your capital in the right places and benefit when these prices shoot up, and to avoid having your capital in things that drop to the ground.